India's only forum for retail real estate. The theme for ISFC 2016 is Shaping the Thinking on the Future of Retail Spaces. As retailers reinvent themselves for omni-channel retail, and as customers and consumers go to the digital and online shopping, how are shopping centers and retail spaces crafting consumer experience around social spaces? Over the next 2 days, we shall try to build the blueprint for success through sharing of best global practices and implementation of world-class strategies and concepts. So welcome once again to India Shopping Center Forum 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to switch the order of the first two presentations. We shall have Mr. Abhishek Malhotra make his presentation after this. And right now, we have a presentation by Mr. Neeraj Bansal. This is an ISCF research presentation, REITs, Real Estate Investment Trusts, the game changer for commercial real estate. The success story of REITs globally is a very encouraging sign for the Indian scenario. Can we encourage the implementation of a similar regime in India? Globally, there are 500 REITs in 22 countries around the world with a market capitalization of over 800 billion US dollars. And of these 22 countries, 9 countries are emerging real estate markets. To make our ISCF research presentation, please put your hands together and welcome on stage Mr. Neeraj Bansal, Partner and Head of Building, Construction and Real Estate Sector, KPMG, India. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Neeraj Bansal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to present before you a very important topic which is emerging in Indian context, REITs, which is a game changer that we believe for the commercial real estate. In my presentation, I'll be covering essentially 3 aspects in terms of how the REITs has evolved from a global perspective, and second in terms of the implications for the Indian retail sector, and third also the India REIT structure as well. When you look at the global evolution for the REITs aspect of it, somewhere it started in 1960s in US, and gradually it's kind of gained much more prominence, but the pace actually started picking up in early 2000s, when the countries like Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, UK, Germany, Greece and France took it up and put it on a more speed mode, and we saw more and more REITs coming up, specifically from Japan and Singapore aspect of it. And India also, with respect to its regulations aspect of it, started forming its ideas and thoughts around it, and there were a movement created to see that we have REIT regulations coming in as well, which we have seen as a reality as well from a last year perspective in that sense. However, from a kind of a launch of a REIT perspective, we're still like a few steps away on that sense, but from a movement point of view, it started in India as well. The primary reason from a REIT's perspective to have it in a commercial real estate is that the fact that the operating company at a number of points in time needs to be asset light. The operating company needs to focus on the core business and needs capital for that. And in a number of cases, the companies which are operating have got their capital locked up into real estate, which one, they may not be using it most efficiently, or they may not be able to leverage it from a most tax efficient point of view, or third, the growth capital that they require can be freed up once you have that capital getting moved out from the real estate that they're holding right now. And having these companies asset light also helps in improving their equity returns. Now from a global perspective, although 22 countries have more than 20 countries have adopted real estate investment trusts, however the experience has not been in the same manner across the countries over there. If you see the global comparison, US has got the maximum REITs, 393 REITs, with almost like 3% market capitalization is from real estate in US, and out of which, if you look at the 2014 issuance part of it, almost 32 billion were raised through the REITs vehicle in US. And when you look at Singapore, which started somewhere in 2002, and Japan as well in 2001, has also seen a kind of a significant increase in the number of introduction of REITs. So Japan launched almost 51 REITs and Singapore with about 37 REITs, and has now, if you look at the 2014 numbers, again REIT issuance has been almost $8 billion in Japan and almost $2 billion in Singapore. in many ways, Singapore REITs has been one of the most successful one in terms of the way the REIT structure got designed, the way the pass-through kind of tax benefits were given over there, and also in terms of the fact that the first few REITs which were launched in Singapore were packaged very, very well and were very successful, which led the investor sentiment to grow and also look at this as an important product in their portfolio. At the same time, Hong Kong has not seen a much larger success over there. If you see, I mean, they launched it in 2003, and there are 13 REITs only since 2003, and most of these REITs are trading at a negative net asset value because of the fact that the initial one, in terms of the tax exemptions which were given in Hong Kong, were not adequate, and second, in terms of the way the first initial few REITs were packaged. So we had some underperforming assets packaged into REITs, and that led to kind of a drop down from an investor movement point of view there, which prominence the fact that that there are, when you look at the global aspects of it, so there are several learnings which have come up from the perspective of from 1960s till 2000, where we are right now, and some of the important ones which stand out clearly are the fact that you need to ensure that you don't package bad or risky assets into REITs. And like, for example, from a retail context, some low-grade performing malls, which are, don't have stable lease rents, or the fact that, these, malls are underperforming from the, fact that there are vacancies over there, or the fact that there is the developers under stress and there is a financial, challenge in terms of, rechanging the mall design, or in terms of, improving the footfalls, in the malls aspect of it. Which leads to the fact that when you package these into REITs, subsequently the returns on these REITs will not be significant for the investors. Also, one other thing has been kind of a learning is this, that that you have to have either a lower stamp duty or a nil stamp duty while you're making this transfer of assets from the operating company to the REITs aspect of it there. This is again dependent on the regulations existing from a country to country perspective over there. And also to be able to help those REITs get a slightly higher return than just a fixed rate of return from the revenue yielding assets, there needs to be a component built in to allow certain percentage of the total portfolio to be invested in under construction or property development as well over there, which helps in generating a slightly higher capital appreciation in a longer period of time for the REITs aspect of it. And another aspect has been in terms of allowing the domestic provident fund and insurance funds to invest in the REIT structure, specifically because of the fact that REIT again is a long-term debt kind of an instrument, which is helping the investors earn a return which is more fixed in nature, less risky in nature, and that is a kind of a profile which is sought by the domestic provident funds and insurance funds as well, which have got huge amount of capital allocation which they can do. So if a percentage of their overall capital allocation is allowed to be invested in REITs, it provides a significant boost, from a REITs perspective there in that particular country. And the other more important part has been also to see that, what is the norms that the government's been deciding in terms of, helping the REITs to do a leveraging of its assets as well. So, from a restrictions point of view as well as permissions point of view, that becomes an important part to see that how REITs can actually leverage its balance sheet and, do more investments. When we look at the overall REIT portfolio, I mean, although REITs generally get construed more from an office perspective or from a mall's perspective, REITs as a whole, as a portfolio, I mean, there have been very, very different kind of REITs which have come up over there in terms of investments into malls, apartments, hotels, resorts, warehouses, golf courses, and there have been some very, you can say, more exotic kind of, REITs as well, which have ventured into timber, casinos, prisons, record warehouses, billboards, hospitals, cell towers. They are expected to get into toll roads, and schools as well, or from a higher education perspective. So any asset which has a stable rent yielding nature or a stable revenue yielding nature is an asset which can be packaged into REIT. If there is a stability of returns, if there is a characterization that the asset return is less risky in nature and it's stable over a long period of time, can be packaged into a REIT structure over there, and which is what we see as happening more and more. although the the different kind of like from a casino's perspective or prisons or billboards perspective, those have been done more in the more developed countries, which have been having REITs for a slightly longer period of time, where the investors and the institutional as well as retail investors have seen REITs performing, and there is a lot more confidence, deciding in them to go for such kind of REITs over there. But more and more in those countries, we see that specialty REITs are the ones which are gaining more prominence. When we look at the kind of a division in terms of the portfolio of REITs vis-a-vis different types of REITs getting created, so retail occupies almost like quarter percentage of the total REITs which are there in the world. So if you look at the Singapore aspects of it, almost 26% is coming from retail, and if you add 19% of the diversified as well, because diversified essentially is a composition of an office and a retail complex. So it's a mixed use retail and office complex over there. So it occupies a substantial chunk, from a REITs perspective over there. And these retail assets are essentially malls or a combination of shopping centers or high street markets which are there, which have been packaged into REITs aspect of it there. In US as well, slightly higher percentage is devoted towards REITs, which is 28% there, and diversified is almost 10% coming up over there. When you look at a comparison from a REITs allocation from a Asia perspective, it slightly goes down to 19% as an overall retail from 26% of Singapore, but the diversified, which is office cum retail, has increased substantially to 56% over there. And when you do a world comparison, almost 26% stands up as out of the total REITs existing, 26% are comprised of retail assets over there in REITs form. So a substantial chunk exists in terms of companies which are seeking, one is in terms of separating the operating company from a property owning company, and substantially trying to leverage those real estate assets to their advantage by freeing up certain growth capital over there. And that's a kind of an increasing norm as well. When we look at some of the success factors which have been there in this entire portfolio of like 26% across the world from a retail REITs perspective, a few of the things stand out. These are malls which have got very strong zoning, which have been not strata sold, which have got space optimization which they have done, which have got constant mall management practices to see that that consumer behaviors, as they are changing, they respond very, very actively. So very, very strong mall management practices, and also ensuring that there is a higher footfall which is coming in there. Two or three things which again stand out from the REITs point of view is this, that you have to have long lease tenures, you have to have very good strong occupier profile, because it's that profile which is enabling that REITs to get a better value. Also, a specific focus has been that because malls specifically are considered to be slightly more risky in nature compared to an office complex, which is the reason why the REITs are looking at investing in those malls which are available at slightly a discount there. So one is able to purchase assets at a slightly at a discount, and then work upon those malls to see that you are able to improve the footfalls by going after the design aspect of it, by introducing fresh liquidity, and also looking at the aspects to say that the overall occupier profile becomes longer and better, and that leads into a higher value from the portfolio that the REIT is holding there. And so in this, the entire thing, the anchor tenants and the tenant mix plays a very strong role in the overall REIT valuation from that asset point of view. Linking this to the implications from the Indian retail sector, as we all know, I mean, we have seen a very, very strong influx of the urbanization which is happening in India, and the fact that there is a strong growth in disposable income across the levels in India, and with the influx of foreign brands, there has been a very strong demand for higher A-grade quality retail space, and also larger floor plates, and also multiple requirements within the same city as well, for those single brand as well. And the fact that, from the malls aspect of it, we had seen in the early 2000s till, I mean, the first decade of 2000, we see a lot more increase in the mall capacity, but as the economic sentiment lowered down and the vacancy rates were rising, then the developers actually reduced the launches of the malls as well, which has led to a very good situation that we've got now lower vacancy rates in the malls, and especially the malls which are superior grade malls. There is a very, very low vacancy rate, rising up to like maximum about 12% of vacancy rate, which proves them to be a very good candidate, from a REITs perspective, there, because you have low vacancy, you have got good profile of tenants, and also long lease tenures which are secured, with those malls aspect of it there. And the fact that there is very strong brand consciousness as well from the young buyers that we have as well, and which is comprising almost like 36 crores as the youth which we have in India right now. And so it opens the aspect that, from a ongoing basis as well, this will continue to fuel the economy from a retail perspective there. Broadly, if we look at it, that there's almost like about 70 to 75 million square feet of space in India, which could be REITable, at the current time. And like in Mumbai, almost 16 million square feet of retail stock is available, which could be REITable. In this, I mean, if you look at almost like 65, 70 malls which we have, there would be almost 20, 25 malls which have an opportunity to be REITed out. In that also, again, there would be a percentage of almost, you can say 20, 25% of those REITable malls, which is almost like 6, 7 malls, are also those which are under financial distress. But the location is good, the tenant mix is okay, the accessibility is good, the retailers have an interest in that mall. So what is lacking in those malls which are under financial distress is that the developers don't have the liquidity to further enhance the mall, or the fact that there is an issue with the design of that mall. So when that gets REITed out, the specific focus of the asset manager can actually help in improving the returns on the mall as well. There. So those are the ones which have got stronger focus, from the REITs point of view, and also the fact that this stock which is available is quite limited in supply in terms of what can be REITed out. So the early the ones who kind of launch the REITs and the ones who kind of take up the space would have a stronger advantage till the time the new REITable stock comes up, as in the development takes place, from there. Because currently we have got lesser number of malls being launched across the country, so they would take some time till the time the new stock comes up over there. And in these malls as well, one of the important facts is that to say that the influx of the new mall management practices, that is in terms of zoning, in terms of a constant change to meet consumer preferences, also looking at the the overall profile of the mall is something which is of importance. And we've seen that with some of the successful malls which are operating in the country, whether you look at the Phoenix Mall or the Select City Walk Mall in Gurgaon or in Delhi. The one which is the most are the ones which have have the highest footfalls, as well as have got a stronger margins as well there. But these malls have been like continuously upgrading themselves and have stronger mall management practices. From the taking this into the context of the Indian retailers aspect of it, the ones who are holding a number of chains, number of stores across the country, or a number of outlets which are present for them across the country, or a presence in the malls, or a number of malls which they are holding right now. So some of the key questions for consideration before looking at REITs as an option, is the point to say that one is that do they hold significant real estate which could be REITed out? What is the current usage of those properties? Is it vacant? Is it excess? Is it getting used adequately? Is the operating company earning profits? That once it REITs out that asset into a property owning company, will it be able to pay lease rents as a market lease rent to the property owning company, which will it have an impact on the the financial aspects of its operation? Are some of these considerations to be looked at, apart from just single aspect of the tax benefits which may accrue to the company by getting into a REIT structure. So these are some of the things which they need to consider before getting into a REIT aspect of it there. From a retail perspective, if we just take an example, from a US perspective over there, In US, there is quite a strong kind of movement which has come up where you've got activist investors who are coming up with analysis of operating companies and suggesting that these companies which are currently earning lesser yields, if they were to leverage their real estate assets by hiving them off into REITs, they will earn much better yields over there. For example, a company which is Penn National, which is basically owning, or has ownership interest in gaming and, racing facilities. When this company allowed a REIT to kind of take place, so within a year, the Penn's share price actually increased by 57%. And in terms of when they decided to do this REIT aspect of it, that decision itself created almost $850 million as the value which got created for the shareholders of the Penn aspect of it there. In the same manner, if you take the example of McDonald's, which has got a huge presence across different countries and holds almost $20 billion of real estate value over there, if they were to decide, and they are considering, from a REIT aspect of it there, so that allows another property owning company to own the different assets which they own right now, and those assets earn a fixed rate of return and allows the capital to be freed up to be invested back by McDonald's into opening more stores over there. In the similar manner, the chains which are operating in India right now, where they have ownership interests on different stores aspect of it, it's a call which they need to do, specifically also in the line of the changing circumstances. As we see that e-commerce companies have been really actively pushing down some of the sales aspect of it there, or the market share is kind of increasing from an e-commerce perspective. So it's an imperative that the chains which are owning a number of stores in different malls or have ownership interest in high street shops over there, they need to look at it to say that are they using that real estate value or the asset which they're holding right now to its fullest potential? Is that asset can be put to a better use? Second, if they are earning gross margins which are good, can that asset be moved into a REIT structure and the operating company then earns, or rather pays a lease rent which is at market value and creates a good stream of capital coming in for the company aspect of it there. So primarily, they will have to balance the two, I would say, diverging interests, that they need to have a control over certain important assets which they're currently owning, and also look at the operational flexibility as well to be able to continue their operations aspect of it there. Because a question which comes up typically is this, that when an operating company decides that that the asset which they're using right now will be REITed out, they will have to pay a rent, and will that rent put a lot of pressure on their margins aspect of it? And also they will have to sign a longer lease as well over there. Then only the property which they're REITing out makes a stronger sense for the investors to invest in that REIT. Now with that coming in there, the thing comes up is that if there is a longer lease period signed, the company loses the benefits of having an ability to shut down some stores. So let's say if a company is having 10 stores and it signs up a lease with 9 years of lease with those 10 stores aspect of it, and 2 stores are not performing well, it is not able to shut down the 2 stores immediately. And that leads to a bit of a challenge in their operational flexibility. While when they are owning the stores, they could actually decide that they may shut down the stores and put the 2 stores into a more user, from a more lucrative point of view, they can use it from a different purpose aspect of it. So from the current chains which are operating in India, they will have to kind of evaluate that the current stores that they own, is there a more benefit to them by continuing to own them the way they currently own it? Or if they REIT it out, they will have a more stronger, let's say, operational flexibility, as well as be able to build a higher return. From the similar example of the Penn aspect of it, the previous slide was about how Penn as an operating company gained by REITing out its real estate assets. This is a aspect of with the REIT which they created. So when Penn moved its real estate assets into REIT, that REIT which got created, that also created more value, because when it started its operations aspect of it, one is that the share price of that REIT increased in value, And secondly, that REIT had a flexibility to go ahead and buy similar such assets. Like in this case, they went on to buy a more a new asset, which is Riverboat Casino Complex, which helped in increasing their overall returns. This brings me to the aspect of how the India REITs currently structured, and in terms of the way they can do the investments. So keeping in mind the current regulations which have been formed in India, which are quite similar to what we find in US or Singapore aspect of it. From a REIT, keeping its mind the true nature of REIT, 80%, at least 80% needs to get invested in revenue yielding assets or rent yielding assets over there, which are completed properties, and which can be more than 80%, but has to be minimum 80%. And that investment has to be either a direct investment or it can be through an SPV as well. When it happens to an SPV, more than 50%, it has to be the controlling stake which the REIT takes in over there in that asset, so that there is a much more stronger control over there. And at least 2 completed rent yielding projects should be part of the portfolio from an Indian REIT point of view. There is a flexibility which has been given as well from an Indian REIT point of view, that almost 10%, less than 10% or 10% is the maximum they can invest in under construction properties or completed but not rent generating assets, or in terms of contiguous land in case of stage-wise physical progress implementation. That is the maximum they can invest in such kind of properties. Also, they could invest into listed equity shares of real estate companies, or in terms of unutilized FSI or TDR as well over there. So within the Indian REIT aspect of it, 80% or more has to be invested in rent yielding assets, completed properties, and the balance 20% to certain extent is allowed to be invested in under construction or in terms of shares or unutilized FSI or TDR aspect of it there. Now what this does is that when the structure finally comes up and when we see a REIT coming up over there, this opens a very, very different and a strong, you can say, driver for institutional capital to be invested into Indian REITs, and also opens up a new fresh set of capital, which is retail investors who cannot own a commercial real estate otherwise, to be able to participate in the commercial real estate game, wherein they can own units of the REITs aspect of it, and actually gain one is a yield which is fixed yield, lesser risk attached to that, and that is why they can one is be able to participate and also be able to gain in a later date from a commercial appreciation also, because as the capital appreciation kicks in, the share value would go up as well, and from that point of view they are able to partake into the entire commercial real estate space, which is otherwise very, very difficult for a retail investor to be able to do a large size of investment and own a commercial real estate space over there. For the developers which have got rent yielding assets currently in place, which could be malls, it could be like hotels or apartments or service apartments, this opens again a mechanism where they can exit and move their asset into REIT, so become asset light, generate a lot of capital which they can invest back into under construction projects and earn a higher return on them, and also be able to create another mechanism wherein the REIT is able to give an option to those investors who are seeking fixed rate of returns and also lesser risky options over there. Lastly, from the REIT's perspective, as we were discussing in the previous slides, the overall impact of this is that you have a set of professional managers coming in who are managing that asset. So if a mall operator is also owning the property and also running its operations, there is at times the direction is not the same in terms of the efficiency which can come in when you have got a professional manager coming in whose only job is to look at the asset and improve the asset, also buy similar kind of quality of assets over there. So from a developer or a chain operator, it leads to unlocking its value, increasing the liquidity as well, so that liquidity which comes up can be used in opening more stores and generating a higher return from the operating company point of view. And from the asset manager or the REIT manager, The advantages are that you have got like an office complex or a mall or a retail shops over there where they can put in a stronger effort to see that the mall has got stronger footfalls, the tenant profile is changed and increased in a better way. The leases which are getting signed up, are signed up for a longer duration. They have got escalation clauses built in. So there is a differentiation which gets created exactly from the point that the operating company or the mall operator is looking at it from the point of view of earning profits from the operations, and the prop opening company or the REIT is looking at to make the gains from the better management or efficient management of the asset which is there. And these two are very, very different profiles as well over there. And from a shareholder of that company, the advantages clearly come up because of the fact that you've got the shareholder who requires a fixed rate of return invests into REITs, and the shareholder which requires a growth rate of return to come up is investing into the operating company over there. Lastly, I would think that the question which comes up for the companies, and which is a very difficult question to answer, is especially for those board managements wherein the underlying real estate value is actually larger than the value the entire company is kind of bringing on table there. So there are companies which have got turnovers and which have got margins which are smaller in comparison to the overall real estate they may hold. Like for example, there would be companies which have got a turnover of 2,000 crores, but if the entire real estate which they hold is sold out, it could generate like 5,000 crores over there. So which is where we will start seeing the shareholders in India as well driving a lot of activism of driving these companies to better leverage their assets and give a stronger value to the shareholders as well over there. Thank you.